Finance Committee debating the Appropriation Bill 2026. We revert to the Appropriation Bill 2026.
They call it again. Yeah.
This Honourable House is now in Standing Finance Committee.
Mr. Chairman, Ministry of Energy, Business Development and Consumer Affairs.
Mr. Chairman, sir, I crave your indulgence and ask permission to have the team from the Ministry of Energy, Business Development and Commerce join me in the well of the House.
Permission so granted.
I'm obliged, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Head 41, Ministry of Energy, Business Development and Consumer Affairs, in the amount of $81,121,253.
Honourable Member for St. James Central, and just let me give the rules so that the public officers who are here will be able to understand how the session is conducted. Minister, you're given 10 minutes to do your overview or introduction of the head. Your public officers who will be questioned or to whom questions will be posed. Well, the questions will be posed to you, Minister, and you are free to ask any of your officers to respond. The response should not take any more than 5 minutes. At the beginning, they should give, and 3 minutes, sorry. At the beginning, they should give their name and the position which they hold within the ministry. Minister, you are allowed 5 minutes to answer any question that is posed or select your officer to answer. Honorable members of the House, you would know that you have 1 question and then you are up to 3 supplementary questions related to the first question that you would have asked, and at the discretion, of course, of the chair. Thereafter, if you've asked that question and you don't have any other supplementary questions, I will move to the next person so that we move smoothly along in this important debate. Honorable Member for St. James Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to make this presentation. Mr. Chairman, I begin by indicating to you that this Head 41, is seeking the imprimatur of the Parliament for the support of a vote in the sum of $81,121,000. And sir, it speaks to 6 essential operational heads of the ministry. Those operational heads would first of all be the Division of Energy and Natural Resources. Secondly, sir, micro-enterprise development. Thirdly, cooperatives development. Fourth, utilities regulation. Fifth, the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs. And then last, but by no means least, private sector enhancement. And perhaps speaking to it in those very general categories may not capture the full weight of what is really the transformational effort that this ministry is supposed to drive. And if I could be enabled to particularize the heads a little bit better. For example, if we speak to utilities regulation, Mr. Chairman, essentially we're speaking about the way in which we build a fairer economy, the Fair Trade Commission, fair competition issues, protection of the consumer and the consumer's rights in Barbados. When we speak to the division of the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, sir, effectively we are talking about the way in which the consumers are impacted by way of cost of living issues, the way in which we protect the consumer by a variety of policy interventions and legislative interventions. Of course, Mr. Chairman, the Cooperatives Department is a very special department which is speaking to democratic ownership and democratic control by the people who operate their own businesses, and that is at a larger scale than just the micro-enterprise sector, which, as you know, sir, is going to be speaking largely to the question of the micro businesses, for example, the vendors in Barbados and so on. But all of those things taken, sir, as I said, are indicative of this ministry really being the economic development engine of the country, and this ministry being the ministry that is tasked with driving economic transformation in Barbados. It is impossible, in my judgment, Mr. Chairman, to speak to the question of economic development and economic transformation without addressing what is now the 800-pound gorilla in the room. And that, of course, Mr. Chairman, is the energy sector. We are, as you know, a fossil fuel reliant country. And yes, we are in the middle of a transformation from doing that. But the projection to get to where we need to be is still going to see us making that effort for another 9 years or so. And so therefore, we are still energy importing as a country. And obviously, today, Friday, marks 1 week since the beginning of the US-Iranian conflict. Last night, I would have gone to bed around minutes to 12, and I took an opportunity in anticipation of today's session to look at the global prices of oil. And it is interesting to note that if you're looking, for example, at Brent North Sea crude, last Thursday, which would have been the day before this conflict began, it was trading at around $68 a barrel. It was last night at $84 a barrel. And West Texas Intermediate, sir, was trading at $69 a barrel, and yesterday, last evening, it was at $80 a barrel. And so therefore, it is a matter of elementary mathematics to recognize that the world prices have moved to the tune of 16 to 23, 24% over the course of the last week. And obviously, Mr. Chairman, that is a matter about which this ministry has to maintain eternal and close vigilance, not only alone, but with also our colleagues in the Ministry of Finance. But even as we work on monitoring prices, we also have to settle certain domestic policy options. And among those policy options, I hope will be some of the things that we will have a chance to discuss at length today. For example, storage in the oil and gas sector, because one of our options must be the storage capacity of the country and how we utilize that. And of course, we have to look at our supply contracts. We have to be looking at ensuring we maintain multiple suppliers and have as best as possible flexibility even in a world where, as recently as yesterday, I believe it was the United Arab Emirates, Qatar indicated that they were stopping their gas production, and that pulls 20% of the world's natural gas supply out of the global market. And if the war was to end tonight, it will still take at least another month for that dislocation to be corrected. So those are some of the issues which confront us now. And as I said, I warmly welcome the opportunity to interrogate them further. But beyond that, obviously, the economic development discussion has to touch and concern what is now going to be a multi-energy policy on the part of the government of Barbados. We have observed the change in technologies, and we believe that it is possible for us now to begin having serious discussions once again about having a low-risk but multi-energy type of portfolio so that we span oil and gas, and that we have involved in the discussion low-carbon technologies, emission reduction technologies, but at the same time, we will continue the rapid advancement towards deepening the renewable energy penetration on the island, expansion of our storage capacity on the island, and also looking specifically at new investments in onshore wind and equally offshore as time goes by. And as we balance those climate justice and environmental considerations with the more traditional oil and gas consideration, obviously we have to recognize that the ministry has yet another division, which at one time was a ministry in and of itself, and that is the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs and the business side of this ministry. And these estimates, sir, speak to micro-enterprise acceleration. The ministry will have, I think it is about $2 million dedicated to fund access. Thereabouts, approximately the same figure with regard to the trust fund. Its ceiling, as you would have heard in the last election, the ceiling of the trust fund will move from $10,000 to $20,000. We want to be able to engage this House on the question of financial literacy, because in my judgment, Mr. Chairman, we cannot have an inclusive growth approach to our economy unless we take the ordinary Barbadian on that journey with us. And I have taken the liberty of distributing a few of the financial literacy booklets, which have been published under the excellent leadership of Minister Cummins, who preceded me. And I have that here for some of the colleagues so that they can have a look and see what we're talking about. Equally, Mr. Chairman, I think we should invite some conversation on the vending zones in Barbados. Colleagues, I hope, have all received a letter from me or from my Deputy Permanent Secretary on my behalf, inviting them to signal their own constituency interests. I hope you got one, sir, with regard to vending zones. I know you're not empowered to ask questions, but I will, if others ask, speak directly to you so that you are not neglected and the people of St. Lucie are not neglected. But we want to move now towards having those vending zones established right across Barbados. And equally, Mr. Chairman, there are some policy interventions that we have to do in order to make this economy work more efficiently. I want to speak specifically, if allowed to things like the electronic single window. I feel, Mr. Chairman, that the idea of a collateral registry is an idea whose time has come and which I think must be delivered as a principal objective of economic and financial opportunity for ordinary business people in Barbados during the course of this third term. And of course, as I indicated before, there's a lot of work that we still have to do with regard to the cooperatives, the cooperative movement. And then, of course, there's the bigger picture where we have treaty negotiations and expanding the diversity of the products and services being offered in our larger business sector and what would have previously been known as the international business sector. So there are a wide range of considerations which touch and concern the activity of this ministry, Mr. Chairman. As I said, this is an opportunity now for us to do what we were not enabled to do because I think largely of COVID and the fallout from COVID during the second term and the latter part of the first. But if we can get this right, it is an opportunity not only to reset the Barbados economy, but to make substantial transformational steps forward and to drive economic development in Barbados. And with those few words, Mr. Chairman, I would beg to move that Head 41 stand part.
Thank you. Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Member for Christchurch West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And thank you very much, Minister, for your very wide-ranging prelude to your entry into the well. My first question, of course, will go back to something that we were working on for a long time. It has to do with the mobile refinery cleanup. You'd be aware that, that when Mobile left, there was a substantial amount of cleanup to be done at that site, at Aquatic Gap. And I'm aware that we had a site characterization was being done. And I wanted to ask you exactly where we are with it. And the follow-up question, I'll give you them all now. Where we are with the site characterization, when do you anticipate that it will be completed? And then do you have any further plans for the site after the site characterization in terms of the actual cleanup?
I'm going to invite the head of the Department of Natural Resources, Jamar White, to speak to a lot of the technical issues. But let me just speak first of all to the last part of your question, because I think that you will recall that we had in your previous iteration as senior minister a number of discussions on this site. We obviously, I think, are in a position where we can say that there is now a tremendous amount of interest by other sectors in that land. When I say other sectors, I mean specifically the tourism and hospitality industry. I think it is an area which is ripe for investment, but obviously, as you will recall, this is not just a decision that this minister can make, but is really a decision that the cabinet as a whole will have to make. But the expressions of interest with regard to the pattern of development in that general area, I believe make good sense, because we have a number of hotels there already. It is well known that we are we have built a new geriatric hospital, and the geriatric hospital's occupants will soon be moved as one of the fruits of this new term into more hospitable conditions, no pun intended. And once that happens, there is an opportunity for there to be a lot more refreshment work done in the area where the geriatric hospital now stands. And I believe that the plans there would see us having facilities that will mirror those which now exist at Sherburne, so that it stands to reason that more investment of that type on that site may be a logical next step. But as I said, Honourable Member, as you know, this is going to be a matter about which the Cabinet is going to have to make a final deliberation. With regard to the specifics of where we are in the cleanup, I would want to have Jamar White, who, as I said, is head of the Natural Resources Department, speak to you as fulsomely as possible on that particular issue. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Minister. Good morning, honorable members. Jamar White, Director of Natural Resources in the Ministry of Energy, Business Development, and Consumer Affairs. With regards to your question, honorable member, yes, I would definitely agree with Minister's sentiments that the area is a critical strip for future development. It is also of critical importance from a historical, cultural, and recreational perspective for all Barbadians. So I think we are very much interested and keen on ensuring that the site is returned to conditions that can be safe for use for the general public. The last site characterization study was done in 1998. It's quite dated, and we felt that it was important to understand the current day level of contamination present at the site and how it could impact surrounding areas. hence the reason for us commissioning the new site characterization study, which started around November last year. We hired an international environmental firm following a tender process, and that firm has started the work in earnest at the site. To date, we've had stakeholder meetings with all of the stakeholders in the area, covering, of course, from the tourism sector to other commercial interests, as well as the general public. And we've kept the stakeholders informed about the process, about the schedule of works, about how it will impact their operations and their daily use of the area, traversing the area, to ensure that we gather their feedback and concerns regarding potential disruptions, regarding what the outcome of the work will seek to achieve. So I think that we've had good support from the various stakeholders in the area thus far, and we continue to liaise with them and keep them informed about the progress of the work in respect of the study. So far, the company, in addition to holding the stakeholder consultations, has started to install a number of monitoring wells and borings across the area. These wells and borings are critical in order to be able to collect samples, both groundwater and soil samples, so that those samples can be tested to understand the configuration of contaminants in the soil and groundwater. That work will continue at the end of this month. The company is due to restart at the end of this month, where they will finalize the remaining borings at critical locations across the area, and that information will be collected, transported overseas, where it will be tested to get an understanding of the characterization and the level and volume and concentration of contamination across the area. Once that work is completed, the company will be responsible for drafting what we are calling a site characterization report, which will outline the exact location, the volume, the concentration of contaminants in the area, where the hot spots are. And through that report, they will then be making recommendations for the ideal method or combination of methods to remediate the site to international standards. And it's very critical for us to ensure that the site is remediated to a standard that can be accepted internationally, that it can be used in a safe manner, not only for operations today, but well into the future, and to ensure that the area can return to its aesthetically pleasing status and state, and that people can use it in a safe and sustainable way. So we expect the work to be completed around summer of this year, around June, July, where we will get the final report that outlines what are the remediation strategies for the site, an idea of indicative costs, the extent of work that will be required to bring it back to its original status, or as near to original status as possible, and that would arm government with critical information in terms of how it can best go about in as quickly and as safely as possible remediating that site to a usable state. So thank you for your question, Honourable Member.
Thank you very much.
Before you go, Honourable Member, on your follow-up, if I may, Mr. Chairman, just make one policy intervention. This issue is alive in 2026 as a result of the fact that Mobile left Barbados and did not adequately do a decommissioning or appropriate site cleanup of that spot when they left. And I believe that they would have left in the early 1980s. I speak subject to correction. It might have been the 70s, but I believe it was the 80s. And it is very clear that we are now in a state of affairs where from the early 1980s to 2026, we have been wrestling with a failure in governance in this country, which must never be repeated again, in my judgment. And I want to say that the ideal of having decommissioning being written into all of our agreements and ensuring that decommissioning work is done when once investment has been brought to an end is something that this ministry will be enforcing as we go forward. It is now written into the licenses which have recently been signed with the Barbados Light and Power. It is going to be part of the battery storage effort that this country will have. And an investment in battery storage, in other words, will also include decommissioning at the end of that investment period. And I think in every other area, especially as we contemplate more work in the oil and gas sector, it is absolutely important that those environmental conditions, and in fact, social conditions as well, because human beings are also directly impacted, communities are directly impacted when we do not get the decommissioning work done. And it is really a crying shame that between the 1980s and today, 2026, we have been forced to endure that situation.
Thank you very much, Minister. And of course, you said it as well. It's absolutely important to bring that area back into production because it's really been out of production in terms of having an opportunity for development for way too long. And I know there's a part to it as a sub judice, so I wouldn't want to get into that side of things. But needless to say, the people of the area would significantly benefit once we get that site remediated. But just one final follow-up, and I know I'm going to push
Honourable Member for Christchurch West, I recall you asked your three questions together. You said, Honourable Member, you said as part of follow-up.
I yield back to you.
And you asked
I yield back to you and
questions.
come again.
Thank you. Honourable Member St. Michael North.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, sir. First, let me start by thanking the people of St. Michael North, in whose name I get the opportunity to speak, for giving me the opportunity to be here, and thank you as well, Mr. Chairman. And I'll also have the opportunity to have a more fulsome thank you to my people during the course of the budget conversations. Mr. Honourable Minister, Senior Minister, let me applaud you and your team for the work that has been done, and not only yourself, but previous ministers who have held this portfolio, for the work that has been done to continue to advance business development, and of course, on the energy sphere, to continue to regulate and to support our enhancement of that sector. I have three questions, but I will answer them in phased manner based on the rules. So my first question relates to the Trust Loan Fund, Mr. Chairman, and I have three supplementary questions on that particular sub-program. So I will keep my questions in that sphere. I want to speak to trust loans relative to success. I believe that this has been one of the significant initiatives that we've had as a government to empower and enfranchise our citizens. And I want to answer a question relative to success to date, especially as it relates to the numbers of businesses that have been supported under this initiative since they have been started. I want to ask about the number of persons within those businesses, therefore, that have been employed. And of course, if there's any information that can be shared by your team relative to the contribution that these businesses have made to our national GDP, I think that that is something that the citizens of Barbados would be happy to hear about, because we're not just allocating funds to businesses, but we're actually seeing a return on that investment coming back to the country. So that's the first question, success to date overall relative to the Trust Loan Fund initiative.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. Honourable Member, I want to locate my answer in a little bit of the history, because I think it helps to understand what the ambition was and appreciate the nature of the journey. The concept in Bangladesh of what was called a Grameen Bank, and that effectively was really a study, or the fruit of a study, which went on for perhaps about 15 years, where a very noted Bangladeshi economist was able to observe the practice that when you give poor people an opportunity to have access to a microfinancing window, and they did not have any collateral, they just had an idea and an ambition. But having gotten the money, they poured their heart and soul into the opportunity. And working as they did in Bangladesh with clusters, groups of people, 4 or 5, who are similarly involved in a similar type of enterprise, beginning it from ground zero, nurturing it like you would a child at nursery school and infant stage, and helping that idea mature into a functional living business concept and enterprise was something that was a success in the study. Having observed that from a distance, that really was the intellectual premise on which the trust fund in Barbados was founded. We perhaps went about it a little bit differently, because it would be true to say that we did not place a lot of emphasis in the early stage of the cluster type of approach. But what we did do was to bring about a financial literacy approach, so that it is impossible today to have funding with the trust fund without also doing some financial literacy program. And one of the unfortunate things about the Barbadian experience is that we also had to endure COVID. And COVID was a major disruptor of all businesses. And of course, the very smallest with the very tiniest profit margin and no buffers in terms of savings, etc., would obviously impact disproportionately on an enterprise at the very micro level, such as what the trust fund services. And so therefore, there was a period of time immediately around COVID where there were some genuine challenges with loans that were not performing at the level that we would have wanted. The option then, and I became minister during that period of time, because excellent work was done by the Honourable Member for St. George North in the embryonic stages of this, South, in the embryonic stages of this effort. And then a decision was taken by me that we will not persecute and harangue these people unto death, but that we will work with them and try to get people who were genuinely put out as a result of COVID. Businesses were frozen. I want you to remember that. People could not go and trade, could not come to traders. In fact, we, as the Ministry of Energy at that time, had to institute for the first time in Barbados' history business interruption benefits for all these small and micro businesses in Barbados. And so therefore, we gave people an opportunity to work with us, and we worked with them, and almost on a case-by-case basis, helped people to get back on their feet without going the way of prosecution and so on for recovery. In large measure, that has paid off and paid dividends. And it has moved many businesses to a platform where now they are not only functional, but actually are at an export stage. And there is in the constituency of the Honourable Member who sits to your left, a lady who had a very unfortunate house fire. But at the point when she had that house fire, she was producing wines in St. Andrew, and she was also exporting. And there are others who have come to that scale as well. So I say that because I take a certain measure of pride when I look at the micro business people in Barbados who have not only borrowed, but paid back, and then gone through the buffets of the storm of COVID and have rekindled themselves and their businesses to the point where we have some on the South Coast, and there's a case study. One young lady who has a spa, she's employing, last I heard, 5 or 6 people with her, all females, as I understood it, and they're also making beauty products and natural soaps, et cetera, and for those South Coast apartments and hotels where there is no spa and no facility of that nature, they now contract with those people so that the guest at the hotel goes to that entity, that enterprise, and gets the services. And there are other similar stories in all of the sectors. You can look at the agro-industry sector. You can, as I said, as a tourism business, and several other areas where we can see that success story unfolding. But to be more specific, I think it is necessary for you to hear the voice of Mr. Jerry Amos, who has been with us as the head of the Barbados Trust Fund from inception. I know that he was not one of the 11 originally seated behind me. He's the imposition. Yeah, okay, and I would invite him to pick up from where I left off. Thank you.
Good morning, honorable members. Thank you very much, Minister. Good morning to the chair. In response to the member for St. Michael North, thanks again for your endorsement of the trust fund. I want to just share the figures with the members and also the general public. To date, the Barbados Trust Fund Limited has disbursed 5,761 loans at a tune of $28.2 million. To your second question, we have actually contributed to just under 7,000 jobs. As the minister alluded to, where we give a loan to someone who owns a spa, that person actually employs 5 to 6 individuals. So while there's only one loan, the actual employment is 5 persons at that point in time. Females have dominated the loans. We have 3,151 females to 2,610 males. Minister, while I cannot speak to the direct contribution to GDP, what I can say is that I encounter many of our clients, and I could speak to the contribution that the fund has made to households. And I'm always happy to see when persons are back to expand the business, to come back for second loans.
Officer, I hate to interrupt your flow with these important figures, but for the record, I just want you to give your, as it's not listed here, your name. We know the name, but they put your position in particular at the trust loan.
Thank you, Chair. Jerry Amos, General Manager of the Barbados Trust Fund Limited.
You can go ahead.
Okay. As I was saying, these persons indeed come back for second loans, and we could see the expansion of their business. But as the minister alluded to, it's not just a matter of giving loans. We emphasize very strong on training, because even as we have the opportunity to take our limit up to 20,000, we must ensure that our clients coming back for this loan are strong on governance, the whole idea of strengthening the business development, the finances. So the National Financial Literacy Bureau is a very important cog in the wheel of this advancement that we're trying to do. And we are sure we are not going forward with anything unless we know that the finances are in place and there's strong governance in these businesses to take them to the next level. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you very much. So Minister and Mr. Amos, it's clear to see that there has been a significant contribution being made to the Barbadian landscape at the level of working class citizens and beyond relative to the Trust Loan Fund. I do think that it would be useful for you to be able to do some level of analysis, Minister, relative to the contribution to GDP, because ultimately we know that these businesses are having at the grassroots level impact on families, homes, households, but it would be good to see how these businesses are also contributing to the national economy as well. So that's just a point to note. As my second and follow-up question relates to the plans for expansion. You have alluded to it, Minister, and Mr. Amos just alluded to it as well, moving the ceiling from $10,000 for the average applicant to $20,000. So I'm looking to hear from you, what are the strategic plans for the expansion of the Trust Loan Fund, since it has been so successful in helping us at the grassroots level, at the micro level? How are you planning to expand this initiative, not only in terms of the ceiling, but in terms of the contribution that it makes to our country?
Well, I want to be very honest with you. The team has not really had a chance to sit together on that specific since the election. And as you know, we really had no time because the estimates were immediately upon us. But we have had 1 or 2 meetings where we have discussed, I think, a critical philosophical point of departure. And it is this. We have to face the reality that first of all, there needs, in my judgment, to be a single entry point for micro businesses as they enter the ecosystem of Barbados. Right now, it is possible, though it is not often done in practice, but it is possible for you to enter not from the trust fund level, but for example, from fund access level. What this does, however, is to point to some of the different considerations which arise between businesses. A business which is at its infant stage, I used the term just now, nursery, is one where you're probably going to have to work with that business person on some very basic issues. There's going to be issues of trying to understand governance processes. There's going to be issues of trying to understand some of the financial literacy challenges. I want to be very candid with you. Understanding accounts receivable and accounts payable is not something that everybody gets right. And I come from a profession where, as recently as this week, though that may not necessarily be a matter of financial illiteracy, that might be a different type of matter, but it is sub judice, and I won't get into that. But the point is that I think we understand that at all levels of this society, these are real and concrete challenges. And so part of what has to happen also is to get people to be comfortable with statutory obligations, et cetera. And every business must be able to do that as they go through their life cycle. It is important that you do not enter as a first-time player without having gone through some of the rigor, which helps you to appreciate the guardrails, helps you to appreciate the guidelines, and to stay within them. Otherwise, you will find that, which was happening now, that there are business people in Barbados who have a good idea, have access to a larger sum of money than the person who may, for example, be a vendor, and they begin at a $100,000 loan, but that they themselves also have none of the appreciation for some of the rigor, the statutory deductibles, the managing of the accounts, the separation of the client's fund from other funds, dealing with the payables in an appropriate way, et cetera, et cetera. And that creates a serious operational challenge at any level of business. So therefore, I think that one of the things that we want to do is to be able to, as best as possible, have a harmonized entry point. The other thing is to recognize that there is a need for us to have support mechanisms in human form for business people who may be interested in production, but have no time to deal with market assessment, market access issues, etc. It is important for them also to be able to get best advice on matters relating to legal obligations and so on. So that there are a range of considerations above and beyond just starting and operating the business. And I think that the ambition must be not just to go from a ceiling of $10,000 to 15 and from 15 to 20, and if I could have my way, go to 25. But the truth of the matter is for us to be making sure that we are holding the business person's hand and that this is an educational process and support mechanisms are in place to help them avoid the snares and pitfalls of the processes. And if we can get that done, then I think we would have done well. Now, I know you want to hear how soon, and I think that is really where the team now has to meet and settle and decide on how fast that can be delivered. But as for me, it is low-hanging fruit, but it is part of a broader developmental discussion.
Thank you, Senior Minister. I think that would be a useful strategic approach to enhancing the funds utility. My last supplementary question on this particular theme of the trust loans relates to practical applications. So how does a barber, a hairdresser, a lady in grisettes who is making cosmetic products, how does a person actually engage with the trust loan fund? Can you have yourself or your officer just walk the public through the process? Because I have lots of constituents I engage with who are seeking small amounts of funds for different purposes, and they simply don't know how to do it. And I do my best, of course, to encourage them and to give them the guidance that they need and the support. But I think the general public will benefit from being able to hear how does one access and become one of these several successful persons who have been able to engage with the trust loan fund over the last few years.
I thank you for the question because it is, it is telling me that as successful as we may think we are, we still have a way to go. There are many miles to travel before you can sleep. The truth of the matter is that in my judgment, and I'm going to let Mr. Amos speak to the approach and the access issues, but it is my judgment we also have to be in the marketplace even more. You will find that during the coming weeks and months, there will be a very aggressive approach by this ministry as we kind of take fresh guard on some of the fundamentals. I am a believer that we must intervene in the market and we must create opportunities for there to be business pop-ups, that we come into your neck of the woods, your constituency, we participate in activities of a national nature like AgroFest and so on, where the presence of the trust fund is, and it gives people an opportunity to interface with the trust fund in moments of leisure, and at the same time be able to have back of mind or top of mind the fact that this entity does exist out there and the entity is approachable, accessible, and can offer you business solutions. Very often people have not thought through the entirety of that which they want to do, but may just want to get a little piece of advice. I have found that several times in my own constituency. So I think that is really one of the approaches, that we got to find people where they are. And in saying that, I also believe that, pardon the pun, the rubber has to hit the road. It is not only the trust fund that must find people where they are, but the financial literacy program must go hand in hand with that, because it is not just a question, and it can never be just a question of making money available, or some people would say, throwing money at a problem. There has to be a structured engagement with the potential beneficiary of the loan. But I leave it to Mr. Amos to speak more fulsomely, perhaps, on the question of how a potential client approaches the Barbados Trust Fund Limited and what the processes involved are once they have gone through the doors or made connection by a virtual manner.
Thanks again, Senior Minister, and thanks for the question again, Member for St. Michael North. We have 7 pillars that we have developed for 2026, and I just want to read from Pillar 2. Through its community walkthrough initiative, BTFL will engage entrepreneurs directly within communities across Barbados. These engagements help identify emerging opportunities, understand local challenges, and connect entrepreneurs with financing and business support. So in 2025, we'd have done a number of community walkthroughs. We started in St. Peter, and we went to St. Thomas. Actually, we did follow the regathering. We went from parish to parish, engaging entrepreneurs. This year, we have a new program in collaboration with the Office of Insolvency and other members of the Ministry of Business and Energy, where we would have something called the Road to 60, where we'll be engaging again in communities, and we are starting from Gold Cup Day, actually. And I was so proud to speak to my staff yesterday here that everyone is on board, even though it's Gold Cup Day. And we'll be out in Christchurch tomorrow in Edie Village. So anyone in Edie Village, we'll be in the village from tomorrow morning, from about 9 o'clock to about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So that is how we intend to further strengthen our engagement in the communities. It worked well last year. It actually increased our numbers last year. The exposure was great. And to answer the second part of your question, our system now is very easy to apply for. We have a full online system, a full launch management system, so you could go on from loan origination all the way to disbursement. And by the 1st of April, online payments will be in effect as well. We're just doing our file testing, getting our data protection, data privacy things in place with the bank, and our online payments will be ready from April 1st. So thanks again for the question, but we are in your communities, members. Trust me, we'll be there. You will see us.
Now, if I may, Mr. Chairman, there is another approach which my permanent secretary reminds me of. I cannot in any way, shape, or form take intellectual ownership of it, but certainly I'm happy to be part of the continuum, a process which began under the leadership of my predecessor, Minister Cummins, and this is called the Business Enterprise Exchange, which will be made effective during the course of this year. And if you would allow me, sir, I would invite the PS of the ministry, Kevin Hunt, to speak to that very briefly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senior Minister. Kevin Hunt, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Energy, Business Development and Consumer Affairs. Just furthering on from the question asked by the Honourable Member, part of our plans as it relates to growing the small business sector relates to pulling all of our entities together. We have trust loans, we have fund access, we have the National Financial Literacy Program, and as Senior Minister would have iterated earlier, it is not just about throwing money at a problem, but it's about educating persons in terms of the development of their businesses. And so one of the initiatives that we want to roll out this coming financial year, Mr. Chairman, is the design of something called the Business Enterprise Exchange, which is a flow out from the amended policy on micro and small businesses. And that exchange, basically how it would work, we will see persons coming on to a portal, and they will engage, first of all, with an AI interface. And when they would have programmed in certain basic information, that information will be pulled, say, from Business Barbados, if they already have an existing registered business name or an existing company. And as the interface takes them through various questions, we will be able to determine what that individual really needs to get their business off the ground. So they might be interested in a loan from Trust Loans, for example, but before they get there, they might need to go through a period of training or equipping through the National Financial Literacy Program and the business pillar of that program. Or we may need to introduce them to the synergies that exist with Trust Loans, for example, and the ICAP. And so once they go through that process, we're then able then to tailor a package suitable for them so that they will then be able to be passed on or funneled to the particular department or agency that will help them either get their business started and on the ground or get their business developed. So that is something we're looking to roll out in this coming financial year.
Excellent. Even as I yield back to you, Chair, to come back again, I just wanted to if I can get some granular specifics relative to how somebody approaches Trust Loan, because let me commend the manager and team at Trust Loans for the good work that they've been doing. So just asking again, if I can just, for the benefit of the public, you mentioned the online portal, but you didn't mention the website. So I'll just ask you to give us the real specifics. How does my hairdresser in Rosettes or in the Lodge or KFL, if she's listening to this right now, how does she immediately go and make access and connect with Trust Loans? And just walk us through that process in a very granular way. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Minister, and your team.
If you would allow me, then I would just invite Mr. Amos, sir, to speak to that granular detail that has been invited.
Thank you, Minister. Member, please forgive me. So let me just be granular. Our website is www.trustloansbb.com. And as you get to our website, there's an Apply Here button that takes you to the portal where you could then apply for the Trust Loan. If you're having difficulties, our office is still open, that persons can walk in, and we have a receptionist that is there to walk you through the process, help you from end to end this very same way. At any point in time, you could feel free to come to the office if you're having difficulties. But up front, you could actually go to our website and apply from our website for your loan. All the directions, all the KYCs, everything is on the website and on the portal to direct you. Any difficulties at all, please feel free to call the Barbados Trust Loan and someone will assist you.
I think you may wish to give the address of the office to Mr. Amos.
The office is Building 4, Suite 102, Harbor Road, St. Michael.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. James North.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Let me first of all thank the Minister and his team for their presentation as well as the performance of their ministry. My question, Minister, to you and your team, you would have spoken on the issue, of course, of growth and empowering the small and medium-sized sector, particularly at a time when the economy is growing. But I know there has been a lot of discussion and work with respect to the collateral registry. So I just wanted to get a sense as to what are the next steps and how do we ensure that we can deliver it for the country.
With respect to the collateral registry, Honourable Member?
Yes, that's correct,
Yeah.
collateral registry. Yeah.
For me, Honourable Member, the collateral registry concept really is one of those parts of a menu of financial options which we must be able to offer to Barbadian businesses. It moves them, or transforms them, puts them in a position of transforming ambition so that it becomes income. You transform ambition into income. And how so? Historically in Barbados, businesses have been undercapitalized and underfinanced at the micro and small business level. That is, I think, an indisputable fact and is commonly agreed. Many business people will tell you that when they have approached a bank or a financial institution of any type, what they're often told is that you need to have collateral, and that collateral invariably comes in the form of bricks and mortar or real estate ownership. So therefore, either you have a building structure, or alternatively, you own a piece of land. Let's put it that bluntly. That has acted as an impediment to progress for many small people who may have a business, and the business, quite frankly, may be doing relatively well, but they don't have the ownership of the land. We have farmers in Barbados, for example, who have not only crops, but have machinery, but they are operating on rented land, and obviously cannot use that land as an asset against which to borrow anything. We have fishermen who have boats, and the boats have value, but they may not actually have land that they own. We have mechanics who have tools, but they may be operating on property that is not theirs. And so therefore, how then does this business use fixed assets in order to leverage much needed finance for business expansion? The truth of the matter is it is virtually impossible to do so. Here along comes the idea of the collateral registry, where you have an opportunity to have a centralized, web-based public database where lenders can record their legal interest. The lender records the legal interest in an asset, and that asset is a movable asset. For example, it can be a tangible good like the mechanic's tools. It can be a tangible good like the contractor's machinery. It can be a tangible good like the fisherman's boat or the farmer's crops. Equally, it could be something that is intangible. That, in other words, your accounts receivable. And you may have done so much work in your business that people owe you $40, $50, $60, $100,000, but it has not yet come your way. But if you have a collateral registry that recognizes that this is a legitimate account receivable, then you can leverage financing against that which you have not yet gotten. Now, the truth of the matter is it therefore creates a new opportunity for business people in Barbados to have a different type of security for loans. The key to it is that we are expanding credit access for those people who are landless, and we do so within the concept, within a construct that gives legal certainty and efficiency. And to make this right, we're also going to have to undergird it legislatively so that we create what is essentially going to be a secondary market. When I was in my first iteration in this chair, had brought in the banking community, and I said this already on the election platform, I say it again. It is a fact that one banker said to me, and I think perhaps tongue-in-cheek, well, Minister, once we lend a farmer, what are we supposed to do if he defaults on the loan? I can't go and take up if I go and take up the cows, what's going to happen? And I had to point out to him, I do not expect him to keep cows at his establishment. The truth of the matter is, what I expect would happen is that we have a secondary market within which you can sell those cows or whatever other product, so that that asset then is sold and you recover the substance of that which you lent. No, that is how the collateral registry principle works. In Latin America, successfully, in Africa, successfully, in Jamaica, successfully. I think Jamaica has not gone as far as the Africans have gone, and certainly not as far as the Latins have gone, but it is an opportunity and an idea whose time has come. If we are going to be serious in this country, Mr. Chairman and colleagues, about transforming economic opportunities for small people who we know because we represent them, and we know that in many cases the ambition level is high, the productivity opportunity and the productivity interest and level is high, but they do not have land or access to land to the extent that they can then leverage that land for the bank loan. Then the business is hemorrhaging or the business cannot be further developed. We have to find a way of getting around that impediment. And part of what the unlocking of the potential of this economy has to be about, in my judgment, must be to go boldly into these new opportunities. It is not far removed from the trust loan, which found its genesis in the Grameen Bank concept, where without collateral, you trusted up to a certain level. And again, people recoiled in horror when that was first mooted. But again, you know, the argument really was, but we trust the multimillionaire who comes here to invest. And he says he wants concessions. And we say to him, well, we will grant you the concessions subject to the fact that you must do certain things with the labor industry. You got to treat the workers a certain way. And lo and behold, then we hear very often that the workers have not, in fact, been treated the way we expect that they would be treated. Or some other condition that was a condition precedent to getting the concession has not been made. I think that we have to begin by recognizing the need to trust the Barbadian population and to unlock opportunities which exist and can exist given the right political will and legal structures. And the legal structure really is a blank slate. We can craft it. I have no doubt the Attorney General, when once he puts his mind to it, will be able to do this in quick time. But I do think that this is a low-hanging fruit, which we've talked about for a while, and certainly I think must be delivered.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Just as a follow-up to that, more broadly on the issue of the micro and enterprises, and how do we ensure that we build out their capacity, particularly in this financial year coming. Just some of your thoughts as to how does the ministry contemplate achieving that?
Honourable Member, micro enterprises in Barbados, I think, have to be the subject of a comprehensive study. I want to begin by saying that my preliminary discussions with different stakeholders in this sector, obviously I've only been in this chair now for 3 weeks, but my discussions with stakeholders in the sector indicate to me that the Small Business Association has coordinated and the IADB has funded a study which I think is still ongoing or has been recently completed but may not yet be have been released. The IADB, obviously having funded it, would have to have sight of it first. But that would be the first study of the small business sector in Barbados to have been done since the Salisa study in 2016. Now that is 10 years during which time we have had policy interventions in this country. We've talked about small business development, micro business enterprise development, and so on, but have not done so against the backdrop of granular, detailed data. And so I first of all, I think we have to get our hands on the fruits of that study that I just referred to. But I recall the Salisa study in 2016, and mentally it gives me a cause to pause, and it gives me a desire to see what the current report will say. And I will tell you a few areas where I think this country will now need to be spoken to very clearly and decisively on some policy issues. That 2016 study reflected a small business sector, micro and small business sector, as representing 85% of the enterprises in Barbados. It also indicated that there was a shallowness in terms of our exports in that sector. So that, if memory serves me correctly, domestic enterprise, domestic commerce constituted 76% of the business's activity, and that those who were exporting were only 24%. So that therefore exports were not a core feature, or exports were marginal to the core business of many of the enterprises within the micro and small business sector. It also tells me, therefore, that inclusive growth really requires that we do not only continue to focus on tourism and the foreign exchange earners traditionally, but that we have strategic and targeted interventions that enable us to take along that large percentage, 76% of our businesses, which are not at export level. And what are some of the considerations that we have to have with regard to them? I think, first of all, it is inescapable in my judgment that we have to have a gender focus on this matter. Most of the businesses that we're talking about, I think probably, if memory serves me correctly, around 60% were male-owned or male-dominated enterprises. We have to strengthen the female-headed businesses in Barbados and increase the number of female-headed businesses. I also feel that there is a need for us to give serious consideration to what the Salasys study told us about revenue. Revenue averaged out back in 2016 around $100,000 for our enterprises, our micro business enterprises, $100,000 a year. And that tells me that there's a very narrow margin of profit, and there's certainly a very limited buffer in the event of hardship like COVID. And I suspect that that is the reason why we would have seen such large dislocation in the micro and small business sector when COVID came along and we had the shutdowns, because there was really no buffer on which these businesses could fall back. And so that is a challenge in itself. So when you look at the percentage of exports, when you look at revenue, when you look at the critical issue of gender, and the way in which we can encourage female entrepreneurship, and for many reasons that I won't have the time to go into now, that is an important consideration. I think we realize that there are some policy interventions that need to be had. Honourable Member, off the top of my head, I would say to you that without seeing the study, I know already that we have to reduce the administrative burdens. And one of the ways in which we can do that is what government is already starting to do more of. That is, have access to the opportunity to satisfy interfaces with government departments online. That digital opportunity helps us to remove some of the time taken for administrative purposes. We have to have better financing mechanisms. You just asked about the collateral registry. That is one. We talked about the non-collateral loans at trust fund. That is another. And there will be others which we have to look at as well. The junior stock exchange is another. I think, and we have not spoken to this yet, but in my judgment, and I've told the PS only this morning, I want the BNSI, well, let me put it this way. There is a legal argument that I am going to have a conversation with him about as to why the National Standards Institute should be anchored within the Ministry of Commerce as opposed to where it now is. But wheresoever it is, we have to have standards and standards training as an indispensable part of business development in Barbados. We tend to do business in this country without also speaking to the appropriate standard at which that business is done. I gave an example out of my own profession earlier today, and I don't need to go back there, but I think anybody who looks at that in any angle will recognize that the question of standards probably does arise. And in fact, across the board, from the largest to the smallest, if you drive along a highway that is now newly paved, but your car is dropping into what seems like a hole, but it is rather a hydrant that has not been lifted to the level of the surface of the road, that is a question of standards of finish. So we have at the multi-million-dollar contractor level, right back down to the person who may be a vendor but is not wearing the hairnet, et cetera, et cetera. And if it is that we are going to move businesses to the level of export, and I just made the point about the shallowness of some of our exports, 24% of the exports of Barbados coming from the small and micro business sector is really not on. It is nowhere near where we should want to be. And if we want to lift that game, then they're going to have to be able to meet standards in other marketplaces. Otherwise, technical barriers to trade will be raised against our business people. And those technical barriers will simply be saying, you can't do business here, you can't sell here, your product is not going to be allowed onto our market because certain standards have not been met. And countries now around the world use not only tariffs, but non-tariff barriers such as standards as means of protecting their domestic market. If we want our businesses to be able to penetrate other people's markets, then we have to be able to have that discussion about standards. And I think it has to be a national standards discussion so that we have an economy which at long last is driven by considerations not only of energy efficiency, but also of standards. So without going on ad nauseum and ad infinitum, those are the considerations that I think. I know that the small business team, Trust Fund and Fund Access have been having discussions on sector-specific shared facilities so that, for example, you share your procurement. Many small businesses find it expensive because they import such a small amount of product that they need for labeling or for boxing or packaging or whatever. If we can have a common procurement platform which enables 15 businesses to get their product in, but at a percentage that is substantially cheaper, then it makes it easier for that business not only to find money to do other things, but to be more competitive. And I should say in closing, Mr. Chairman, the question of resilience, because nowadays, 2016, nobody was talking the language of resilience. Today, I think everybody has to be mindful of that. So, Honourable Member, if you ask me, one of the things that we have to be looking at as we go forward is resilience in all of our subsectors. In agriculture, it is necessary to recognize, for example, that the former Honourable Minister of Agriculture, the member for St. Philip South, would have had to confront losses of chickens last summer and the summer before that. Thousands of birds were dying in Barbados because of the heat and the way in which those birds were being packed, virtually almost one on top of the other. We have to find ways of making sure that those small farmers who are growing birds are able to do so in more climate resilient ways. I think of the fishery sector, and I recognize what is happening in the energy sector now internationally. But many of our fishermen are still using diesel, in the boats. And so therefore, we know that the cost of that petroleum product is already climbing. I spoke to that earlier. It climbing 25% on the global market. Try as we may to insulate, part of what we must do is to move that sector out of a reliance on oil and gas and petroleum-related product. So that those are some of the conversations which we have to have, Honourable Member. It is a bit of a mouthful, I know, but I welcome the question because it helps us to speak in more comprehensive detail to the type of transformation initiatives and considerations that, in my judgment, we have to take on board if we are going to seriously bring about the level of growth that I think this country is capable of and that this ministry really wants to drive.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member, and I really am heartened by the direction in which you've outlined, particularly with respect to the reduction of the administrative burdens, because I think that will certainly go a long way in helping the sector to transform and to unleash their true potential. And also the question of resilience that you've mentioned. I also welcome the opportunity to, particularly in the context of the reform of our curriculum in education, one of the things that has to now happen in earnest is to ensure that our students who are doing business, and even not just in the formal studying of it, must now understand that irrespective of what business you're pursuing, part and parcel of the architecture necessary going forward will be understand how to be resilient, how to pivot, and how do you work with others to ensure that you can have a comprehensively strong business going forward. So I welcome the opportunity between our two ministries also in that regard.
I thank you, Honourable Member, and let me say now that I have you on the floor, let me thank you publicly because your sterling leadership and frankly the leadership of those who came before you as well has enabled the financial literacy program now to be in every single primary school and every single secondary school, public primary and public secondary school in Barbados. And what began as a pilot when I was minister with 12 schools, we now have it in every public secondary and public primary. I think 102 schools now have that financial literacy program going on every week. And that is a fundamentally important development in our infrastructure.
Thank you, Honourable Member for Christchurch West Central.
Thank you, Chair. My questions, Minister, will be located in the energy sector. I know Barbados has as a noble goal to transition to a fossil fuel-free environment by the year 2035. Understanding and appreciating, of course, the environment, geopolitical, the trade situation, we are very familiar with what is happening because of climate change in the Panama Canal. We recognize that there is a war that can disrupt supply chain. There are a lot of numerous amount of issues that could either change the goalposts or cause us to look at alternative measures, etc. I want to know what is your ministry doing to ensure, if the goalpost is still 2035, that despite all these challenges, that we can transition, not only because it is the climate conscious thing to do, but because it is a cost-effective measure as it relates to how we are sustaining the livelihoods of those persons who live in the nook and cranny of Barbados. Thank you.
Well, yes, Minister, I want to start by saying definitively that 2035 is still the goalpost. I think that, as I had indicated to you just now, there's, and I should also signal so that he prepares himself, Mr. Brian Haynes, who is the Director of Renewable Energy, would be invited to speak to this matter. But I am thinking, Honourable Member, that there are obviously, as we go along the next 9 years of this journey, there are some things that we have to be prepared to do as a country. Again, it is perhaps transformative, but we have to accept that there are solutions now which are designed to specifically reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the operations of an traditional oil and gas industry. So that you have a traditional oil and gas industry, which, for example, would do maritime exploration and extraction of oil or gas, or both. It is now possible to design a way of reducing the greenhouse gas emissions from that type of operation. It will require that we have mainstream mandates which would have to be set at the pre-qualification stage so that the companies with whom we speak and with whom we negotiate would have to be demonstrating a capacity in terms of their current operational experience and their current operational abilities to meet some of those strategic mandates, which might be things that we wouldn't ordinarily have been thinking of doing, certainly when I was first in this chair, and I would have gone with the Director of Natural Resources to Texas to start an offshore bid round. At that time, we were nowhere on our radar was things like satellite and digital monitoring, which would allow for us to identify or for us to mitigate methane leaks in real time, or to do things like optical gas imaging, where, as I understand it, you can have cameras detecting where there are what they call fugitive emissions. Those types of things would not have been part of what we were requiring. But today, because we are going to have a mixed energy portfolio approach, we are going to go back to the majors and have the discussion, and Cabinet has approved that. But what we must also do is to have that discussion within the context of low carbon technology. I think equally, Honourable Member, that you would be pleased to know that we are also very conscious of the need for there to be methane abatement. Methane, as I know you know, is the second most important greenhouse, or perhaps the second worst greenhouse gas. It lingers in the atmosphere, I am told, 80 times longer than carbon dioxide. And it is the cause of several other things, including public health crises, illnesses, premature death, etc. It has a very severe impact on agricultural sectors because of crop losses and reduced crop yields and underproductivity in economies. None of those things are things that we want to have to continue to treat. But the truth of the matter is, unless we change the way in which we go about certain business types and business practices in Barbados, then that is one of the things that we are going to have to confront. Many years ago, for example, Honourable Member, I told the Prime Minister, who has now gone to the great beyond, that in my constituency, I had and still have the obvious challenge of a landfill at my people's doorstep. And that landfill is a national landfill, and it produces substantial amounts of methane. And I think that part of what this ministry must now do, and quite frankly, the country must now be looking at how we capture some of those emissions and utilize them, as opposed to this just being a way of poisoning our environment, our atmosphere, and our climate. Now, I have spoken to you in language that I believe that you live, sleep, eat, and understand, so we are good there. But I want you to hear the voice of Brian Haynes, who is in charge of the RE exercise on the part of the government, and I would invite him to say a few words on this as well.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Honourable Members. My name is Brian Haynes, Acting Director, Renewable Energy in the Ministry of Energy, Business Development and Consumer Affairs. The Minister had raised a very valid question, which we have been grappling with for some time within the ministry and with our stakeholders. Indeed, we have been working on a number of fronts. One, we want to diversify the energy mix in order to help to keep costs within reasonable measures. In that regard, we have been working to develop between 30 to 50 megawatts of wind in the north of the island, which is around one of the best wind regimes in the island. That would help to keep costs within manageable levels. Indeed, as well as we seek to increase the scale of renewable energy, we, at the pre-development stages, as well as around the development stages, de-risk as much as possible projects, which means development costs are kept as low as possible. These help to bring capital costs to maintain capital costs at reasonable levels and affordable levels. The other prong is regulatory concerns, where we ensure that rates of returns are kept within reasonable levels, and which is fair to investors, but also keep costs down to consumers as well. And most importantly, as well, we are seeking to ensure energy efficiency, because a dollar saved is a dollar earned. And this means for us that once we are able to use our energy in a most effective way, we are able to keep the costs down as we are ensuring efficiency and use, getting more out of less. The most important as well is within the area of stability of price. As you would know, and the minister has mentioned, we are likely to see escalation in prices as a result of the conflicts within the Middle East. In this regard, once the volatility of prices is kept in check with renewable energy, these are some of the critical steps that the ministry has been working and continue to work and will be working in the coming financial year to achieve. Thank you, sir.
Just a follow-up.
Honourable member, before you Honourable member for St. Philip West.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you report progress to His Honor, the Speaker, and beg leave to sit again.
The question is that I do not report progress to His Honor, the Speaker, and beg for leave to sit again. All honourable members in favor, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman has reported progress and requests leave to sit again. Honourable St. Philip West.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of the House until 12 noon.
The question is that this honourable chairman be suspended until 12 p.m. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting, the ayes have it. This honourable chairman stands suspended until 12 noon. The sitting is resumed. Prior to the suspension, this honorable chairman was debating the appropriation bill 2026 in Standing Finance Committee. We revert to Standing Finance Committee.
We resume Standing Finance Committee. Honourable Member for Christchurch West Central.
Thank you. Minister, energy independence has been the buzzword in your ministry, and rightfully so. If I want to take myself and use it as an example, I would love to know the day that I'm able to access batteries to be able to come off the grid independently, like a lot of Barbadians. We know there are challenges as it relates to abatement technologies around the world. And this global challenge is not independent of Barbados. Barbados depend on trade and activities as it surrounds access. What is your ministry doing to be able to help Barbadians to access this technology, especially batteries? And what are the challenges that we are having in the international sphere that seems to be making it very difficult for us to transition in a just way? Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. With regard to the latter part of your question, I think one of the first considerations that we have to be mindful of is that the orders that we make in Barbados are, and our problem, frankly speaking, is not limited to the international sphere. Let me be very clear about that. But with regard to the international sphere, one of the realities that we have to confront is the smallness of size. And when we make an order, it is just like what we went through with COVID and the vaccines. We make an order for a commodity, but we have such a small scale, it is infinitesimal compared to what others are asking or ordering. And so therefore, we are never given priority. And in a point, for example, when we were first having this conversation, the Russia-Ukraine war was beginning, and the entire world was moving almost as one with regard to the effort to source battery storage. And so therefore, prioritizing Little Barbados really became, for the producer, a matter of a nuisance. It's a waste of time when I can make, for the same effort, I can get sometimes 10, 15, 20, maybe 100 times more money than what I get off of Barbados. And that's just one of the realities. But let me come to the substantive domestic issue, because I think your question is vitally important, and we have to confront it. We have come to the point where our grid has reached its thermal limit. And as a result of that, unless the grid is given necessary support, there is a modernization. There is really no ability to make significant connections. In other words, we need now to have battery storage in order to go forward. I think that it is, and I'm going to ask Mr. Brian Haynes, who is the Renewable Energy Director, to take careful, follow carefully what I'm saying so that he can backstop me, as I will invite him to do. But today we have 103 megawatts of solar photovoltaics connected to our grid. But at the same time, we have 134 megawatts of solar PV, which has been blessed with approval in terms of licenses having been granted, but they are not yet connected. And the reason why they're not yet connected is because of the state of the grid, its incapacity to go further without battery storage. So that you have a situation where you have 237 megawatts of solar PV accounted for. We do not just do this blindly, like, swiping like blind elder. There is a guiding, I suppose, principle set down by what has been called an integrated resource and resilience plan, which is a very careful study, and like any other study, it is really only a moment in time. But when the study was done, there was a recommendation, two things. One, we need to have an energy mix in Barbados. You should not be reliant only on one form of renewables. And so therefore, we are looking at a mix, and that will include wind and other things, hydrogen, etc. And equally, that for renewables, the limit set was 387 megawatts. So that if you are at 237, really and truly, you have roughly 150 megawatts of additional capacity of solar photovoltaic to go onto the grid. Obviously, where demand grows, then there will be a need for greater capacity and allocation of that increased capacity. We have a duty to try to increase the level of demand by increasing the growth of the economy. And so therefore, as there are more investments, more people employed, more houses being built, et cetera, greater demand, and people will want to have access to this particular form of energy. But coming to storage, that state of affairs where we now are means that we must now move speedily to get the storage onto the grid, and that the batteries therefore become important. Before I became minister, the FTC, Fair Trade Commission, would have approved 60 megawatts of battery storage for Barbados. My own personal judgment is that we're going to need more, but that is where we are right now. And a request for proposals for the investment in battery storage was issued in November of 2025 when Senator Cummins was Minister of Energy. That request for proposals had set a closing date of 6th of March this year, 2026. The market itself, which is the people who will be making the proposal, the people who are the investors, are saying that they want more time. I want to emphasize that the market is asking for more time, not the government. So that they're saying that, and I think they have asked for extensions on the basis of needing what in law we will call further and better particulars, PS, and that there may be as many as 184 requests of different types from the market so as to enable them to better be prepared in order to make their respective proposals. So that has come to me, and I have agreed that I will give them an extended period of time, and that I have drawn a line in the sand at the 30th of April, 2026. So that is the new closing date. I am advised that that is within the authority of the minister so to do. So that April the 30th has been, and I think that there is a formal process for that notification. So the notification really is not coming from Parliament. The notification will follow the correct process to be followed. But I want to say that there is now going to be a need for us to do a few things in order, as you are saying, for us to advance this process further. I am advised that once the procurement has begun, we are going to have a minimum of two, and this is a worst case scenario. There would be a minimum of two entities providing those 60 megawatts, so that the maximum that any one entity can make as an investment will be 30 megawatts. Now, that may seem trite, but the cost of 1 megawatt battery storage runs into millions of dollars. However, my own philosophical belief, and it has been from the very beginning, I was the minister who brought to this parliament the householders' right to renewable energy. And you will recall that the principle behind that was to ensure that we democratized the process, and that we give average Barbadians an opportunity to play, to be in the space and to earn from the space. And philosophically, I remain anchored to that view. I do not feel that we can continue to have new sectors evolve as a policy of this government, to have sectors evolve for the first time and it be treated as the way in which we treated the move from the plantation economy, where there was a too few in control and many, many peasants who had no ownership or control. And then we went to tourism and we saw it happen all over again, where there were a too few in control and many, many Barbadians who are at the lower rungs of the ladder in the tourism and hospitality sector. And in the international business sector, we saw that happen yet again. And I refuse to accept that we can be looked upon favorably by generations to come if we allow it to happen in renewable energy, and quite frankly, if we allow it to happen with regard to the battery storage component of renewable energy. So that, for me, the avoidance of market consolidation is an important consideration. Now, I believe that there are many ways in which we can approach this problem, but I'm just sharing with you because you asked me my perspective, and I'm giving that to you. But worst case scenario, in my view, I know for some people it will be the best case scenario, but there will be a maximum, a minimum of 2 players for that 60 megawatts. I would want to see far more people being involved in the battery storage exercise. And I know that there are many people who have crafted their own applications. Now, there are some difficulties, and I'm going to ask Brian Haynes to speak to these challenges because we have to make sure that the portal is once again reopened and that people can have their application processed, considered and processed. I believe it is necessary for us also to have a procurement committee that is functional, and that procurement committee, as I understand it, is supposed to involve many departments of government, including town planning and government procurement and government electrical engineering and Fair Trade Commission and so on. I myself have spoken very briefly to the new Minister of Planning on this matter, and I think she and I are going to have a sit down because once again, questions of efficiency will arise, how you enter the system. You will recall that when we came to government, we found a vulgar system, in my view, where you could enter make an application for renewable energy, a PV license, from many different places. And so therefore, there were some people who went straight to the light and power. And government had no knowledge, the Ministry of Energy had no knowledge, and therefore the Ministry of Energy had no oversight over what was happening once those people entered the system. But then when matters didn't go as they would have them go, government that never knew about it was lambasted for a hold-up. And some people even went so far as to go through the process, put things on their roof, put systems on their roof. And
Honourable Minister, put some systems.
Oh, sorry, I forgot the time constraint.
You have 5 minutes.
I feel so strongly about this, Mr. Chairman. I feel so strongly about this, but let me not go there now. There will be opportunity for that. I would invite Mr. Haynes to speak to this issue.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister. And thank the Honourable Member for the question. The process by which we are seeking, and your question towards the area of energy independence and storage is once again a very vital question you've raised and a very important component in making sure we make the transition. Storage is a very critical element in this process, not only for the grid itself, but also, as Minister has indicated, the democratization of the sector to allow more persons to come on to the grid in a safe and manageable way, but within the confines of the limits of what is demanded out in the market. In that regard, we have, as been mentioned, but I will elaborate, we have about 3 major methods, 2 of which have been really brought into force. The first is, as been mentioned, is the procurement method, where we bring on 60 megawatts. We're looking to bring on 60 megawatts. The second one is through the energy storage tariff method, which is a smaller process which deals with the 1 megawatt storage, which would attain to the householders and small businesses and also larger businesses. And what this two-pronged approach thus far will achieve is to ensure that there is a level of independence for the nation as a whole, but also gives some independence for the general public as well. Now, we have to be cautious there because we are a small market and we are not an intercontinental environment or market. We are island. And in that regard, we have to do that being mindful of the costs and how that cost is addressed and the burden that is borne by the market. So what we are speaking of here is to make sure that as more persons become, as you say, independent, we don't want to have a situation where persons remove themselves from the grid entirely. What that does is that it means that less demand is available on which we spread our costs. So we have to balance it in a way which we have, where we said for smaller systems, the 3 kilowatt systems and so on, you can have your sale of access, where you are able to sell you have your storage, you have your production, but you're able to sell your access to the grid and you have your independence there. We've limited it in that regard for smaller households. Indeed, for storage as a whole, we've indicated that through our integrated resource and resiliency planning, a total of about 370 megawatts of storage coming onto the grid. This is required to support the grid and to make sure that we strengthen the grid to be able to carry renewable energy, in particular the variable type, which are wind, solar, and that technology of that ilk. In addition, we have started what is called a virtual power plant pilot project. We are in the design phases, and that project allows for amalgamation of or grouping of the technology such as the RE and the storage to provide an additional layer of support for the grid, and also an additional area where the public can become involved now in providing services to the grid, along with storage. As well, there's the move, as part of that project, we are also working towards vehicle to grid, where persons who have your electric vehicles, you will be able to provide support. Of course, there's a cost which you will be compensated for over time, but the work of the pilot now is to see, consumer behavior, what the regulatory arrangements will be, and also to work with our stakeholders such as the utility and our partners, the Fair Trading Commission, to make sure that we get the regulatory environment working. We are starting on a small set of projects first, so we get the regulatory environment correct, so we identify how we should tariff these things, and how can we bring that independence together in the market while simultaneously ensuring that we keep it at a cost-effective level. So that is the approach in terms of, in that area. Minister raised that we did have some challenges in terms of the developing the process for applications to make sure that we allow for all those persons who want to participate in the storage arrangements. We have gone live with our application process for that in November of last year. Indeed, we have received up to 96 submissions for applications thus far, and we are in the process of carrying out work to validate. Once we validate those applications and identify them as real applications, because there are some things that are missing from these applications on some occasions that we have to work with the potential applicants to make sure that they are, consistent with what is required, so that safe deployment of these types of resources can be achieved. So this means now that it allows for renewable energy to come onto the grid. Those projects that were, built but have not been connected are going to be at a high level of priority within this process, as well as those who have been built, connected, but have been curtailed. And we are going to work in such a way that we ensuring that all those systems that Minister has referenced that we have to connect are within that priority, to ensure that the government upholds its obligation as they have been licensed within that regard. So I just wanted to make sure that we are clear in that instance, and it will go through the process, and once we have addressed all those issues, we anticipate within the coming 3 or so months that we'll be able to start seeing those applications becoming licenses or going to our advisory committee for recommendation for approval, and from there we anticipate within the 12-month period or 18-month period that storage, we will start to see the storage coming on to the system.
Minister, I want to thank you and your team for that extensive explanation and elucidation on the matter. But to me, we are dealing with a double-edged sword, because the access to abatement technology is one issue. Another issue in my mind, which has been causing a lot of atmospheric noise, is the issue that surrounds the decommissioning, especially of batteries, which we know cannot, by all environmental circumstances, enter into the landfill as a means of decommissioning. I know that, Minister, your legislation and your policy first and legislation spoke to an extensive plan which had the unreserved backing of the EPD. And that plan and policy, and law, Minister, I know that your ministry would have taken the time to expose to Barbadians the importance of companies having a decommissioning plan for these batteries. I want you to be able to neuter this atmospheric noise, unfortunately, and to let Barbadians know that we do have a plan that is recognized internationally as a solid plan for the way how we treat to these batteries at the end of the shelf life, which may be 5-10 years down the line.
I thank you, Minister, and you heard me on this matter of decommissioning without being provoked this morning. And I go back there again. This minister does not fathom that we should ever go back to what we have gone through with Mobile for the last 1/2 of a century, with a major investor coming to this country and leaving a sordid environmental mess that we then have to find a way of fixing. And that should never happen again. So I can only say to you, I need no persuasion whatsoever on the question of decommissioning of any technology whatsoever. When I had the opportunity to, in the previous iteration as this minister in this ministry, one of my first requirements was to sit as part of that body, that team that were negotiating with the Light and Power on licenses. And I know it is written into the license that there must be decommissioning protocol. And equally, there's the establishment of a decommissioning fund. And I would want to invite, again, Mr. Brian Haynes, who was integral to a lot of that work, to speak to some of the issues surrounding the decommissioning fund. I cannot, honestly, from the top of my know the memory, and I don't trust the memory to give that to the House accurately. I'm hoping that Mr. Haynes can do so. Thank you.
Yes, in terms of, thank you again, ministers. In terms, Chair, in terms of the decommissioning and work around, especially around storage, a significant part of the applications that come before us has to address energy storage management plan. Each applicant have to come, not only how are they going to decommission, but how are they going to manage that storage system during the life of that system. For example, in terms of how are they going to deal with any leaching that may come from those batteries, how they are going to deal with fire suppression, and so on in terms of safety. In terms of the environmental components, it is a requirement within that plan that they must specify the management of these batteries within the particular areas with which they are going to be deployed. We are working with our partners, EPD and so on, to ensure that with the larger systems as well as the smaller systems, that there is a decommissioning plan that will come with the procurements of these battery systems. And what we want to ensure is that when these systems reach their end of life, that the environment is returned to its natural state as much as possible, and it is not being a burden on the people in the surrounding communities of those systems, as well as to the country and to the purse of the country. Part of that plan would be a fund that they have to address, and they would have to make sure that the plan and the funding that they are bringing for decommissioning will have to match. They are allowed to reevaluate the plan over the life, and as a result of that, there may be adjustments to how they are going to fund decommissioning. So within that, those considerations, the ministry has been working over the last few years and continue to work to ensure that we bring storage, and particularly battery storage, to be deployed as safely as possible, and working with our partners in the system.
Just to finally say that legislation that you have also extends itself to the automobile industry as well.
Yes,
yeah, it does.
Yes, correct.
Right, thanks.
Honourable Member for St. Peter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My first question, and I hope that I get an opportunity to ask some of the others, but just in case time runs out, this relates to vending zones. I've heard, Minister, what you said in your introduction. I believe that we can use this opportunity to share some more particulars with the public. I'm asking this because there was much expectation when the vending bill was passed, and we recognize, when I say we, I'm referring to residents in St. Peter, in St. Lucie as well, that not very much was done, and that term might even be generous. We have recently been asked to resubmit some information to your ministry, and I am confident that we will see some progress. The question I have is the idea of vending zones embedded in the philosophy of the ministry, or is it dependent on instruction? I don't mean to be overly provocative or even bad, to use a good old Russell term, but because of what we haven't seen for the past 4 years or so, I just want to be clear, to be sure that what my constituents and other constituents in the North expect out of the vending bill, with particular reference to those zones, is going to materialize. And then when I spoke about being more fulsome, if the answer is yes, that we're going to be moving forward, as I expect it will be, then what do vendors, what can they expect to see or to feel with respect to what these zones will look like? I think it is important for them to understand what is coming for them, but to hear it not from us as the MPs, but directly from the ministry responsible.
Thank you for the question, Minister. I begin on the very pertinent point of whether it is embedded in the philosophy of the ministry. I want to say to you that it is embedded in the philosophy of the minister. And I believe that the ministry has shown me absolutely no resistance to the idea. As I have said, it is an idea whose time has come. I do not in any way blame the ministry. We, again, for the delay, I think we, again, have to be mindful of the fact that we embarked on a transformational idea, pregnant in the anticipation and the belief that that which had never been done in Barbados before could easily be done. We had to collide with certain realities, one of which is that the legislation which we ourselves drafted and had to draft made requirements of us that had to be confronted, but the government itself, coming out of COVID, did not have the capacity to immediately meet those legislative requirements. That's just simply a fact. One of those requirements, for example, was that once you go to a place where vending is taking place and there has been some reason to intervene by law, and you take possession of a vendor's produce, then there is now a legal claim that the vendor can mount against the state. In all of the history of Barbados, that was never possible. Policemen would come and take up whatever they got to take up or trample the vendor's products or whatever, and there was no question of compensation for that loss. Now, there is that issue. And so therefore, there's a requirement on the part of the state to provide an appropriate storage facility for any produce that may have, for whatever reason, to be removed from the possession of a vendor. And we didn't have that. And we had to have within the financing of the Ministry of Agriculture's budget that capacity. And I think it is correct to say that we've now gotten there. But equally, there was not a capacity in the Ministry of Energy and Business at that time to do the construction of the vending zones, neither financially nor, quite frankly, in terms of the project management expertise and experience. And so therefore, we ventured out, almost going to sea in a Moses. The fact of the matter is we've gotten those things right by dint of effort and experience. And I think we are now in a position to do far better and to move far faster. And again, I have to say to you, I am indebted to my predecessor ministers in this ministry, Minister Cummins and former Minister Sutherland, for the preparatory work that had been done to get us to the point where we are here right now. Now, I think every member of this House, as I said before, would have received, as a result of my express request, that the ministry write to every member so as that every constituency representative will have an opportunity to indicate to us where he or she would want to see the vending zones located in their constituency. Honourable member, I want to be candid with you. When I first did that, just before I left the ministry, I did not get a reply from everybody. And so therefore, I think that when we speak about going slowly, sometimes we have to also look into, not necessarily you, but we have to look into the mirror, because we could go far faster if everybody was moving to the beat of a common drum. Having said that, this is where we are right now. What will it look like? First of all, we want to make sure that this is a hospitable environment introduced to vending. I know for a long time the cultural practice in Barbados has been that you go and get a little coconut water, and it dawns on nobody, man, woman, or child, that the person selling you this coconut water has been there since 7 o'clock in the morning sometimes, and will be there until 4 o'clock alongside the road. And nowhere within eyesight of that vendor or the person visiting the vendor is there a pipe to wash the hands, a bathroom to be found if the person has to relieve him or herself. And the reality is that we all know that we have bodily function. And so therefore, a healthy environment within which we, again, have standards. And this economy must, I am going to say this, if it sticks, let me put it differently, until my dying day, I will say this: we have to have an economy where we introduce and maintain standards. It is in the best interest of the business community, I mean in the community of vendors, and it is in the best interest of their clients that there be basic bathroom facilities. We're going to have that. Equally, we have to have Wi-Fi, because we're in an era now where we're moving towards a cashless society and economy. And therefore, I share the ambition with the Minister of Finance that I could pull out my cell phone and go in front of my coconut vendor and move funds from my account to his seamlessly and don't have to have a dollar bill involved in the process. And that makes life safer for him, because those who are charged with responsibility for law and order in this parliament and in this government know that there have been multiple instances where men get, what is the term used? Stick up. I don't think we say stick up anymore, the AG. Men, there's a different term. jack up, maybe. But for the fact that they're walking about with money in their pocket in circumstances where they're unprotected. Equally, I think that there must be not only Wi-Fi, but lighting. I do not know why we feel that vending is a business process that should end at sunset. And I know of no economy in the world where people can't do their vending, a serious economy that is, across hours. Now, the fact of the matter is, this dawned on me when it was about the government's business as a tourism minister in Ghana. And I saw families coming out to vending zones in Ghana as a family evening exercise, where they were coming to eat the food that was there, coming to buy the coconut water experience, coming to buy cloth, coming to buy whatever was being sold, but in that area that they were using as a zone. And it was almost like a place of recreation at 8 o'clock at night. Now, we know in Barbados that has come to an end in Barbados by the time it starts to get dark. So I think that we have to light it, we have to have in the Wi-Fi, we have to have in the bathroom facilities. We also have to have vending zones that offer a plurality of experiences, as is happening elsewhere, so that you can get some food to eat. You can have those people in your constituencies who are competent cooks being able to make $1 off of their competence. Equally, I think it is vitally important that we have the people who are doing nail tech, the people who are doing barbering, the people who are doing a range of other crafts and businesses having their opportunity to have a stake in the vending zone experience. And that is the way in which we collectively have a means of lifting the tide so that many, many ships can now sail on a financially successful voyage. So I believe that that is really what it would look like, and that is the reason why I have again asked for every member to be written to so that we can plan. There's $2 million in the $2.5 million in the budget, and I think that obviously we can't do every vending zone in Barbados one time, but what we must be able to do is to plan and prioritize and roll out in a systematic and seamless manner, because different locations will require different things, and therefore different competencies of government departments would have to be brought to bear. The Ministry of Energy and Business will not do the building themselves, but we will have, I think it is to be done via rural and urban development in partnership with us. But I want to give the Chief Business Development Officer, Mr. Anderson Cumberbatch, an opportunity to speak a little bit to the history that you have pointed to, Honourable Member, and to the thinking of the ministry, because you asked whether the ministry was philosophically aligned, and I will allow their Chief Business Development Representative to speak to that.
Good morning.
I should say he's now acting Deputy PS as well.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, honorable members. I'm Anderson Cumberbatch, the Deputy Permanent Secretary, Administration. Substantive post is Chief Business Development Advisor, responsible for this aspect of the work. I would first want to give reminder that the National Vending Facilities Program is an initiative under the wider National Vending Policy Framework, which I think most of us know was established in 2021 to achieve a number of goals. 3 of these goals were to empower vendors by promoting decent and safe work in which they can operate free of harassment and discrimination, and generally to allow vendors to legitimately play their trade in an atmosphere where there's mutual trust among our vendors, government, and other relevant stakeholders, including the general public. Secondly, the policy spoke to the need to decriminalize vending and to reduce the incidence of vendors feeling ostracized and marginalized while promoting vending as a viable career option. And thirdly, the whole notion of promoting vending was to facilitate economic enfranchisement within the general Barbadian society. So of course I concur with Minister when we speak about the philosophy embedded in the ministry, and not only the ministry, but I believe the government of Barbados, where we are trying to promote vending across all walks of life and to participate in vending as what we regard as a very noble activity. Now, we would have started with, there were about 8 vending zones that were identified, and as the Minister would have indicated, we are now looking to establish 2 vending facilities across the 30 constituencies. Much of this preliminary work would have been undertaken, and we would have confirmed at least 14 locations across each of the parishes in Barbados. But as we know, we are waiting on the responses from various parliamentarians so that we can add to this list. I also want to report that, and you new parliamentarians, you can submit your responses as soon as possible so that we can include you in this aspect of our work. I'm also pleased to report to this honorable house and to Barbados today that the Redmonds Village facility is on schedule to be completed at the end of this month, and the Fitz Village vending facility will be completed at the end of April 2026. We would have established a stakeholder relationship with the Rural and Development Commission, and as a matter of fact, we have pivoted to what is referred to as a design-build maintenance model, where we would work collaboratively with this agency so that we can be better positioned to execute on the vending program. Obviously, while we are looking at these new locations from within the various constituencies, we're still going to be working on the Top Rock, the Newton, and the Haggett Hall vending zones. What we're looking at when we would have had our site visits with the Planning and Development Department, we're looking at, for example, are the lands, government lands, are there any encumbrances on the land, access to foot and vehicular traffic, and so on. And the focus is not only on the buildings themselves, but what we have to look at are the persons who would be the entrepreneurs within these facilities to provide business development training and so on, financial literacy training. So essentially, I think that we are, I know that we are in a good place where we can execute on these vending zones. And to answer our minister in relation to his question, we are well on our way to execute this time around. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I am happy to hear that, especially given that I just celebrated the 4th anniversary of sending my list of vending zones to the ministry. The date of the email is actually 28th of February 2022. So this is a very nice anniversary, 4th anniversary gift, just to remind that the pursuit of perfection is often the enemy of the good. And I'm not sure that you will want to wait for everybody before you start. You obviously did not, because you mentioned one opening at the end of this month and one at the end of April. So you have not waited, and we look forward to that. I want to ask another question, a follow-up. Now, you've spoken about the physical, and I believe that those who are hearing understand the physical. The question I have, the follow-up to that, is there going to be, and this is probably in light of what was discussed with respect to trust loans and, excuse me, and clustering, is there any intention at the level of the vending zones, or I don't remember, you use a nicer term than zones, but is there any intention there to maybe incorporate either a clustering or a cooperative model, or to encourage? I'm asking that because I know that your ministry also does significant work with respect to cooperatives, but the public doesn't often hear about the work of the cooperatives department. And I'm wondering if vending zones, given that it relates to persons who are gathered in a particular geographical space, even more so than the clustering, where you're not necessarily in the same geographical space. In a zone you are. Is there any thought about maybe expanding the work or developing the work, or probably making public the work of the cooperative department with respect to developing those vending zones? I ask that question also because this is now a little bit not parochial, but I'm aware that the International Labour Organization does significant work with respect to cooperatives. It is one of the areas that they've been working on for probably a little bit more than 100 years. But I don't hear anything from our cooperatives department in that light. So I'm just wondering if the vending zones could be an opportunity to expand that work in the development of that sector.
Thank you for the question, Honourable Member. And the question really admits of two approaches to the answer. one of which is really to give you an opportunity to hear from the Registrar of Cooperatives, Mr. Brent Gittins, who is with us on this team, as to some of the, I suppose, not just challenges, but the opportunities which I believe can present themselves once we have modernized the cooperatives legislation in Barbados. To answer your question via the other limb would be for me to say to you that I want to begin with the vending zones as outlined by, or identified rather, by honorable members, by also engaging with honorable members, again, on the question of how we populate the vending zones. It is entirely within the right of an honorable member to assist or to guide this ministry with regard to the people who will be the business persons given the opportunity in the vending zones. I perfectly understand that. But I do feel that it is important, and I will certainly write to honorable members and to the cooperatives that exist in Barbados to find a way in which we can have cooperative experiences being located within vending opportunities. There is an excellent example of that, I believe, in the constituency of the honorable member for St. George North, where there is a cooperative vending facility in that constituency. And I don't see any reason why we cannot have some sort of a mixed approach, the individuals and also the cooperatives who may wish to have a presence. Again, my approach to these things, honorable member, is to be as inclusive as possible. I know that for some people, it appears to be tiresome and it appears to be repetitious, but that is the reason why I wrote to everybody, because I really want to make sure we do not leave anybody behind. And I know that there are many members who have not, even though you, honorable member, would have received 3 or 4 iterations of an invitation across different ministers. The truth of the matter is, I want to make sure we have everybody on board as we go forward. And it is in that principle, that precept of inclusivity, that I also feel we have to look at the situation with our cooperatives, because this gives not only individual traders and small and micro business people opportunity, but it gives market opportunities for existing cooperatives or cooperatives that will be created. And I think that that expansion of the collective endeavor equally is important. Now, Mr. Gittins probably would have had an opportunity by now to take his seat behind me. So I would want to give him a chance to share his thoughts on this matter.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Brent Gittins, Registrar of Cooperatives. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Honorable Ministers. I think the concept of cooperatives being involved in the vending zones is a very good one. It means that individual vendors can cut down on costs, they can share expenses, they can be part of a people-centered enterprise in which they share the services and the benefits of that enterprise. That is what a cooperative is, a democratically run organization, and it can be anything. So the vending zones can be transformed from individual vendors to a cooperative which has a group of vendors which are doing business, reducing their costs, their economies of scale is much better than if they're operating individually. So I would suggest that I have a very nice little chat with the Chief Business Development Officer and my minister. I will have a chat with them to see how best we can move forward with a cooperative that addresses those vending zones, because I think that more and more Barbadians are becoming aware of the cooperative business model. I think last year, the cooperatives department would have been in every parish in aligning ourselves with the regathering initiative. We would have engaged quite a number of persons about the cooperative business model. Coming out of that engagement, we formed 3 cooperatives, one in agriculture, one in beekeeping, one in agriculture, beekeeping, and construction. We're also on stream to register another cooperative in fisheries. The fisher folk of Barbados have indicated that they think that is a good way to go as well. We have another one in construction coming. I would say that this year we plan to increase our visibility via social media, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. I think we definitely need to increase our profile. We will continue going into the communities. Sometimes we would go with the Trust Loan Fund, so I will give Mr. Amos a little scolding. He didn't tell me about the going into Christchurch initiative that we usually will team up with the Trust Loan Fund and other sectors of the ministry. We team up with the financial literacy program. We do outreach with the youth entrepreneurial scheme. So we do understand that we need to increase our visibility. We will also be working with the ILO we're looking at this year to amend and upgrade our legislation. We do have contacts with the ILO, so we will be working with them with that. We're also looking to create a written national policy, cooperative policy for the cooperative movement to look at improved governance, sustainability, and other areas that we know that need to be strengthened. So I think this year looks like a good year to definitely increase our visibility to make the public more aware what the cooperatives is doing. And I anticipate that if the situation comes up for us to form a cooperative with the vendors, I can see that being something that we would welcome at the cooperatives department. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just make one other policy intervention, it would simply be to say that the legislation, which obviously is going to have to follow on the policy development work that the registrar is just referring to, is going to require us to make it easier for people to form a cooperative in Barbados. In fact, irrespective of the outcome of that policy work, I think we are going to have to swiftly engage on this question of how easy it is to form a cooperative. At present, you would need to have as many, I think, of 10 people who are similarly oriented. We need to make it easier because of the fact that simplicity and in terms of the numbers enables in small societies like ours, a few people who are anxious to move fast. And I think this is one of the opportunities that will enable us to capitalize on things like the vending zones, where you can have, even within one community, a couple of people who come together and they may not wish to incorporate a business or do anything like that, but rather just to come together because they share a common interest in some area of economic activity. It may be cooking, it may be craft, it may be whatever. And then they are able to form their little enterprise and do business within a space that is a stone's throw away from where they live, or certainly within the general geographic area. I think that these are some of the ways in which we have to make the interventions real. And as I said at the very beginning, I believe we have to meet people where they are and make it easier for them to do business. And that is where I see the merit in the suggestion from the Honourable Member for St. Peter.
Thank you very much. No other follow-up questions, but just a comment, a closing comment to thank you and the ministry for the work and to the registrar through you for the work done so far. I'm pleased to hear about the outreach to the ILO. The Honourable Member for St. George North is an active member of the governing body. We'll be able to help you if you have any, as we use in colloquial terms, any stick-up. Also to say to you that the Decent Work Country program that Barbados signed last year with the ILO includes a segment on the social and solidarity economy. And it is in that space that the ILO does a lot of its cooperative work, so that I will have my ministry also reach out proactively to include the cooperatives department if it is your desire, so that we can have some collaboration where that is concerned. But also we stand ready to help with direct intervention with your approach or your reaching out to the ILO in a more general way. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
Okay. Chair. Go ahead. You can break. Yeah.
Honourable Leader of the House.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I beg to move that you do now report progress to His Honour the Speaker and beg leave to sit again.
Beg a second.
Question is that I do now report progress to His Honour the Speaker and beg for leave to sit again. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman has reported progress and requests leave to sit again. Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the House until 2:20 past 2.
The question is that this honourable chairman will be suspended until 2:20 p.m. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honourable chairman stands suspended until 2:20 p.m.